Hello and welcome to the My Veteran Experience podcast. My name is Joe Wallace and I'm your host. Today we'll be joined by Beth Jarvis, who's actually a colleague and a friend. And the My Veteran Experience podcast is speaking to veterans about their experience and how it impacts what they do today. So Beth, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you on your maiden voyage.
All right. Well, first question is, tell us what you want us to know about you.
Wow. I guess the one thing I would focus on is kind of my perspective, I think, is different from a lot of people just because I've experienced the military on with many different prisms. I'm the daughter of a career Army officer. I also was an Army veteran myself, and I'm also a spouse of a retired Army officer. So I've kind of gone through it with lots of different perspectives.
Okay, well, great. Well, so let's unpack all that. So it looks like
Okay.
you've checked every category known to the military background. So how was it? And I grew up as a military dependent myself. My dad spent 30 years in the Navy, and we moved around. So why don't you kind of go over your experiences as a dependent? And I know you moved around, and what that all kind of has brought you to today.
Sure. Well, I look back on it. I think I've shared this with you before. When I look back on those years, I look back on them with fondness now. However, going through it, it was sometimes really difficult. I was fortunate that I was sandwiched between two sisters, and I was the middle kid. And my sisters and I, we were all a year apart and are a year apart. So that was always nice to kind of have that cushion when we would move different places. But it was tough sometimes, especially being that new kid in the cafeteria and having nobody to sit with, and just having to kind of restart every 2 or 3 years and kind of reinvent yourself. I mean, there were sometimes pluses to that as well, but it could be really difficult as a brat. And I did it. You know how people send you those Facebook tests, and I did one recently about list all the places you've lived. Well, I've lived 17 different places, and the place I'm in now, I've lived here for almost 20 years. So those 17 different places mostly occurred when I was a lot younger, and that can be kind of traumatic, being uprooted that much.
So was there something about that period? Did you have an outlet? I mean, what was it that you did or did you keep in touch with people? Kind of what was so you moved. So I remember it was old school. You wrote letters to people, or you did it that way. You got the long distance phone call for $20 for 3 minutes or something. So how did you? So what were your outlets first, and then secondly, how often did you keep in touch with folks?
Yeah, I mean, to this day, my friends growing up in high school, middle school, those are my closest girlfriends. I mean, so you did form really deep bonds with people, but we didn't have social media or any of the stuff that kids have now. So it did require more effort, and I did write a lot of handwritten letters. I remember that, and my dad was very frugal. We didn't make those phone calls because he didn't want to spend the money. So there wasn't a whole lot of phone calling going on, but there was definitely a lot of letters. And then just in terms of connection, I played a lot of sports growing up, so those were some of my closest friends too, or the other women that I played sports with. And yeah, I'd say that was my main outlet as a military kid. And then just having some cool experiences living in Germany, living in places and traveling a lot, and just getting exposure to things that a lot of, kids who aren't military family members, they don't have those benefits.
Well, without not having to say all 17 of them, name some of the places you lived and maybe rank them out a little bit.
Well, probably highest on the list. It was great to live in Germany, and I spent 3 years in Heidelberg, and those were probably my favorite years as a military kid. And I know you lived overseas as well and went to high school overseas, and it's just really special to have your prom in the Heidelberg Castle and to go to Spain for your senior trip. I mean, who has those kind of experiences? So that was number one. Really enjoyed living in Fort Carson, Colorado. We lived there both as a child, and then again, my husband was stationed there, so lived there for a total of 6 years, and that was another place I really enjoyed. And then also right after I got married, we lived in Hawaii. So, I mean, I thought that was awesome too. We got to live there for 3 years. So a lot of people got what they called island fever there, but I never felt that. I enjoyed those 3 years over there a lot.
Sounds like some.
The ones that weren't so great, I'd have to say my least favorite was Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. We were only there a year, and there were a lot of tornadoes.
Oh God.
It was kind of weird. And like you would go to the commissary and get your groceries, and the prisoners would pack your groceries. So it's just kind of a weird place.
Yeah, I've been there. It's sort of, what, it's about 45 minutes from Kansas City. And
Yeah.
it is sort of reminds me of what the frontier was like back in the day, right? It's just
Yeah.
So your father must have just been at school for a year, right?
He was.
Okay.
But that was a tough one, because I mean, it seems like you just unpacked your house and you're already packing it back up again, because it went really fast. It was a quick year. But I did start playing soccer there, which was a lot of fun. And I did see a lot of Kansas City Royals games. So those were probably the silver linings of being at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
I hear soccer is a great sport.
Yeah, I know. You're yeah.
So okay, so where did you graduate from high school, and then what did you decide on for college?
Yeah, so high school, I was in Heidelberg up until 10th grade, and then I had to come back, and I was kicking and screaming. Me and my sisters, we did not want to leave, and came back to Northern Virginia, which is where I live now, coincidentally, but came back, and I ended up going to Hayfield High School, which is in Alexandria. And after high school, and so was here for 2 years, that was a really tough transition, and especially for my older sister, who was a senior, having to come back. Our only saving grace was that my parents were really good friends with, I'm not going to name the boy, but with this family, and the boy was like the stud of the high school. So we came in and we knew him. So that kind of helped us,
You guys were in, man, the in crowd. Well, I'll just say real quick. I moved after 3 years of high school in Florida, and then I just did my senior year in Spain, and that was tough, but looking back, I don't regret it at all, because I had an awesome year in Spain.
Oh, yeah.
Which you guys did the opposite,
right?
Or your sister did the opposite,
right?
Okay.
Yeah. It was really special to go to school overseas, because they were the DOD schools then, the Department of Defense schools, and I mean, it was just, the schools were small, everyone was super tight. You didn't have the cliques the way you did in stateside high schools, and it was just a really fun community, and we just had a great time.
But if you did anything wrong, everyone knew about it within like 2 minutes. It's like,
we all know those kids who got their ID cards taken back and sent back
right.
to the States. So I was not one of those kids.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, I kind of interrupted you. So go ahead.
Oh no, not a problem.
You came back to the U.S. Hayfield High School.
So I'm at Hayfield. Senior year, my dad, he's a West Pointer, and he wanted me to go that route, but I didn't really want to go the academy route, but I was open to ROTC. So I applied for an ROTC scholarship. I got a 4-year Army ROTC scholarship, and I ended up going to University of Dayton in Ohio. And so went there, graduated, had a business degree, minored in communications. And then when I came out, I was commissioned as an adjutant general corps officer, and my first assignment was over in Germany. So I got to go back to Germany.
So one question on your ROTC experience, because I went to the Naval Academy, and I can never really imagine what just regular college was like, because I just didn't do it. Mm-hmm. And then again, ROTC, and I had many friends. In fact, my roommate when I was active duty for a while was ROTC. And what was that like? I mean, did you sort of feel different wearing the uniform once a week? Or I don't even know if that was it. So what was that experience?
It was great in that it paid for my education, and that was my main motivation to do it, was to get a free education. Plus, I think being a military brat, you're patriotic, and everybody and grew up with it. A lot of people serve, and so that was kind of instilled in me. But in terms of ROTC itself, you would go every Wednesday was when we'd have to wear a uniform. And full disclosure, there were many Wednesdays where I would blow off my class just because I didn't want to wear my uniform. So at first I felt kind of self-conscious, because there weren't that many people that were in ROTC at my school.
How big a school is State? How big a school is State? How big a school is it?
It was about 10,000, I think, at the time.
Okay, so not super. Yeah, so not super small, but
yeah. So I think about 10,000 plus a law school, but it wasn't, big enough, but small enough.
Yeah, you could kind of blend in. I mean, it wasn't like 1,500 people where all the people in uniform were standing out like a thumb, right?
Right.
It wasn't like that.
But I mean, I was also in when there weren't that many women in. So, I just felt a little self-conscious. And there were some people that were really into it that, And I
Yeah.
wasn't one of those. I was kind of ROTC light, I wasn't,
Right.
it wasn't my life.
You
But
didn't
some,
iron the uniform?
yeah, but I remember some of my friends, they knew I was self-conscious about it. So they would kind of heckle me from the dorm windows. I remember one time walking up and I had my books in my hands and I'm kind of sheepishly returning to my dorm from the ROTC building. And two of my roommates are at the window yelling out Foxy, Rotsy, and just giving me such a hard time. So they would do things like that just to embarrass me. But I made some great friends in ROTC too.
Yeah.
Again, some of my lifelong friends are people I was in ROTC with, because you just got to know them really well and you spent a lot of time with them. And one thing at my school, we had to go on FTXs. I feel like it was every semester, and we would go tour a battlefield and we'd have to reenact the battles. And a lot of us weren't big fans of that, maybe me included. So,
You weren't putting on your revolutionary uniform and jumping on
no,
the field?
I was kind of phoning it in, charging,
Right.
Little Big Horn or whatever. I don't even remember. We went
There's
to
people that are totally
Chihuahua.
into that stuff, right? There's people who totally into these
Oh,
war
totally.
reenactment stuff.
And a lot of them I was in ROTC with, but I was not one of those. I was kind of like resentful, like, oh man, I could be back at school partying, and what am I doing this? But it was, I got to know people really well, and we had a lot of laughs and some really good memories from those years.
And you did summer training, right? Because I remember I
did.
did summer training as a midshipman. You would integrate with ROTC folks on the ship or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, we had to
How was that?
go between my junior and senior year. You had to go to advanced camp, and mine was at JBLM, Joint Base Lewis McChord, is where I went. So that was, I forget how long it was, maybe 6 weeks in the summer. That's something I don't even know.
Is it similar to band camp?
I never went to band camp. I
Okay.
did not play any instruments, so I can't answer that definitively.
All right.
I don't think so, though.
Okay, good.
I think it's harder.
Okay. All right. So you graduate University of Dayton, you commission, you said Adjutant General Corps.
Yeah.
And then did you go to Germany right away?
No, I was going to an infantry division, and as a woman and as AG, my personnel officer thought it would behoove me to go to airborne school prior to going to Germany. So I was talked into doing that. So I did that, graduated from airborne school, and then I went to Germany after that. So.
Okay. And where were you in Germany?
I was in Bad Kreuznach, which
okay,
it was 8th ID, which it does not exist anymore, but that's where I went, and it was awesome. That was a great time.
Yeah, I think that base is closed as well.
I think so.
Yeah. So, and then there, what were you doing?
I was in, 3 years, and it was, AG stuff. I was a personnel officer. I remember running the personnel center, doing the ID card processing. I was a protocol officer. I had a number of different jobs. Some were at division headquarters, some were with the PSC, the Personnel Service Center. And so I did a lot of different things, and I enjoyed it, and I did really well in the military, but I kind of went into it not thinking it was going to be what I wanted to do for a career, because it's all I had known growing up as a military brat, and I just wanted to see what else was out there. But an awesome foundation. I got so much out of those years, and again, made a ton of friends. It was a really fun time to be over there. There was a lot of young lieutenants, and we traveled a lot and just had a great time. So it was a really, really positive experience, and something that I think was very foundational in terms of forming who I am today.
And looking back now, did you have good leaders?
I did. I had some really good leaders. Yeah, for sure. Some of them,
Anyone stand out?
Yeah,
you don't have to say the name, but someone.
They're
and
definitely.
Why? What made this leader different or good?
Yeah, the first one, his name was Major Joseph. He was my first immediate boss at the PSC, and he was phenomenal. He just was so squared away and knowledgeable, and just had a good way of managing people and getting buy-in from people. He's the one that stands out the most for me. And then when I was a protocol officer over on division staff, there were some really sharp officers that I worked with, especially, and some really strong NCOs. So I had a really good experience, and I can think of a couple, mostly lieutenants, that were kind of bozos, but for the most part, the caliber of the people I worked with were really solid.
And what else happened in Germany?
I don't know. What are you angling for? I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
Oh,
I know you've asked some. There's
are
something else
you?
happened in Germany.
Well, I found my husband. Is that what you're
Okay,
talking about?
I am.
Okay.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean,
That
not
that
that I,
small little point.
yeah. So my husband Paul, he was also an Eighth ID, but he was at Dexheim, which was down the road, and we actually met at an REM concert. There was a group of lieutenants that all went, and there was like a party beforehand, and then we went to the concert, and that's how I met him. And then we dated, and he ended up staying in and did 20 years. I punched out after my initial obligation was up, and so after Germany, I went to work. I transitioned out and I went to work for Ernest and Julio Gallo Winery in Modesto,
Okay,
California.
so wait 1 second
Yeah.
now. So you're getting. I just want to back up real quick.
Yeah.
So you're leaving the army and you're looking for work, right?
Right.
So go over that real quick, or go over what was that process like?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, being in Germany, and again, I got out feels like 100 years ago, so we didn't have all of the resources that we have
I
now.
won't say anything.
And I mean, even the internet, like we just didn't have, you couldn't access stuff the way you can access stuff now. And so it was, definitely anxiety induced. I think even though my transition experience was different than what people experience today, that the things that remain the same are there's a lot of fear. I mean, there's a fear of the unknown.
Sure.
You're afraid you're not going to be able to find something as meaningful as what you've been doing in the military, and just kind of you don't have the knowledge about corporate America that you did of the military. So it was kind of fear-based, I think, getting out. I went through, at the time, there was companies that would help you transition, recruiting companies, and I ended up going through one called Cameron Brooks. I don't even know if they still exist, but went to Cameron Brooks, and I had a lot of opportunities. I was kind of looking at a lot of sales and marketing and sort of roles is what I got pigeonholed with. And I ended up taking the job at Gallo and was a marketing manager, working on Tots and Andre Champagne. So it was kind of cool.
Wow. Nothing like working in the wine industry, huh?
Yeah. And the other thing, like, it was literally at the time, Ernest and Julio Gallo, which they're brothers, and they were just, I mean, icons in the wine industry. They were alive, and you would have meetings with them. And I remember one where we were trying to come up with a new varietal for Andre Champagne, and we were sitting there like, having a champagne tasting. That was our meeting, and putting in Chambord and mixing in things with it and trying to concoct a new flavor. So it was.
Now, were you in like Napa Valley or Santa Rosa? Where were you based?
No, I was in Modesto.
Modesto. Okay, I know Modesto. Okay, that's right. Is that where they're based?
And the headquarters was beautiful. It was like it was gorgeous. It was like a campus, like a southern campus, and it had my memory of it is literally peacocks were strolling the grounds, and it was very lovely.
Yeah.
But Modesto itself, I think, is best known for what Scott Peterson killing his wife.
Yeah, it's an agricultural area. Then it's kind of the gateway to going to Yosemite and all that as well. You kind of go Modesto, but yeah, it's not known as the highlight of California.
Yeah, I haven't been back since I worked there, but I mean, it was fun. I'd never lived in California, and again, got to travel, went to San Francisco a lot and other places. So I enjoyed my time there, but it was pretty short. I wasn't there very long.
And then, and what went from there?
I was kind of segueing to that. So Paul and I continued to date. We did long distance. At the time, he was at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. And so we ended up getting engaged, and I ended up leaving Gallo, and I went over to Hawaii. So that's what happened. And then we spent 3 years in Hawaii. That was our first duty assignment as a married couple, which was great.
So you're now military spouse, and then you're in Hawaii, and you're looking for work. Kind of, what's that like?
It was kind of tough, because again, I hadn't been in Gallo. I was at Gallo a little over a year, so I didn't have a ton of civilian experience, and I'd done marketing. And then Hawaii is kind of a unique animal in that if you're not a local, if you're not from there, you definitely encounter some bias, trying to break in. And so when I went there, I ran into a lot of rejection, I have to say. But then I ultimately ended up with a job at Bank of Hawaii as an events marketing manager, which was a great job and really exposed me to a Hawaiian culture. I was in charge of like setting up outrigger events, and I got to go to the neighbor islands a lot and do different corporate
Cool.
events. So it was a really great job. I really enjoyed it and got to really kind of get an insider's view of Hawaii, which helped indoctrinate me to the culture and just to being there and being understanding of kind of what real Hawaii was about. So it was a great experience.
And then eventually, I'm sure you were transferred, or Paul was transferred. So kind of go over a little bit of that time through Paul's career. I assume he did 20 something years. Well, I know he did 20 something years.
Yeah.
And then what was it like as a spouse, kind of moving around and finding work, and how difficult or not difficult was it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel for military spouses. I experienced it. It's really tough to have a portable career. It's tough to start over every time. You run into a lot of bias from employers who are hesitant to hire you because they know you're not going to be there long term. So there's a lot of barriers that you need to overcome. And I certainly experienced them with every PCS that we had. And after Hawaii, we went to Atlanta, and Paul went to grad school there, and he was only there about a year and a half. And that was probably my toughest transition. And I specifically remember going to a recruiter to try and get them to help me find a job. And this guy really marginalized me and made me feel terrible. And, I left that. I remember leaving that interview, just going to my car and bursting out into tears. I was so frustrated. But then I ended up, I persevered and I continued on and ended up going to another recruiter. And this one specialized in military, which was called Bradley Morris, which still exists. And you and I have some history there. So I ended up going to interview with them, and they turned the tables on me during the interview and said, "How would you like to work for us?" And long story short, I became an account rep with Bradley Morris.
So for full transparency, that's where Beth and I met.
Yeah.
A couple years ago in Atlanta at Bradley Morris. So I've known Beth since I'll just say the mid 90s, and we've kept in touch over the years, or actually kept in fairly close touch. So so great. So you're in Atlanta, you go to work for Bradley Morris. So from there, I mean, I know what happened, but what was actually what I would say a positive thing in that role. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate. Bradley Morris was one of those employers that allowed me to take the job with me as we moved. So I kind of struck pay dirt with that and ended up, doing really well with them. I was with the company, I think 7 or 8 years. But after Atlanta, we moved to Wilmington, North Carolina. I continued to have the job there. I just telecommuted, and then I would have to fly into Atlanta for conferences and whatnot. And then we moved after Wilmington. We went to Fort Carson and continued to work for Bradley Morris. But by this time, I had 2 kids, and kind of it became overwhelming trying to manage the job, the kids, and then Paul was deploying a lot. So I was basically a single mother for many of those years. And so I ended up leaving paid employment for intending it to be just a brief period of time, but it ended up being almost 11 years, I believe, in total. So, then trying to restart up my career, we moved from Fort Carson back to the DC area. And, I decided at that point, my kids were older, and I felt like I was ready to get back in the game. But, it had been a while. I felt a little rusty. So ended up I decided I should go back to school, just to kind of felt like the old skill set had atrophied a bit, and that might update me. So I ended up going, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Was there anything that sparked you to go to school? What was there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I shout out to MOA, Military Officers Association of America. They had, at the time, I think they only had an annual career fair. Now they have more. But I decided to attend one of their career fairs, and one of the keynote speakers was a woman by the name of Jane Wottrell. And at the time, she was a reporter for the local NBC affiliate. And she was, I will say, seasoned, and had told me, I had talked to her after she spoke because I thought she was really motivating, and spoke to her, and she told me, "Hey, I'm 60 whatever years old," or however old she was at the time. And she said, "And I know I don't want to be, getting phone calls at, this or the crack of dawn, having to chase down a blizzard at my age." She goes, so I knew I needed to reinvent myself. And she said she went to this program at Georgetown, which was a master's in public relations and corporate communications. And she said it really, changed my life and put me on a different career trajectory. And she encouraged me to look into it. So I was really intrigued by what she had shared with me. And deep in my soul, I've always, been kind of a writer and a communicator. That's really my strengths, I think. And so, and even going in undergrad, I wanted to be a journalism major, but because of my scholarship, I had to have a BS degree. So I chose business instead. But really, writing and communication, that was kind of more my skill set and what my passion was. So I ended up enrolling in the program. And I mean, I was by far the oldest person in the program, but that was really cool too. I felt like I learned a lot from all the younger folks that I was in the program with, and they were incredibly accepting of me. And it ended up being, I got through it in about a year and a half. And then, I felt it gave me a lot more confidence too, because like I said, I've been out of the game for a while, and it was just something that kind of re-sparked my confidence and my passion for wanting to get back in the work field.
Great. And then after you completed that degree, then what happened after that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was looking for work because at this point I knew I wanted to go back full time. So, had a lot of feelers out and kissed a lot of frogs. There were a couple opportunities that one I ended up taking for a short stint that was not a great fit. But then you and I had always stayed in touch, and along with other people in my network. And I mean, this just speaks to the power of networking and why it's so important. And you had an opening on your team, and you reached out to me, and you knew I was looking, and the role, which is a engagement manager for the military affairs team for Microsoft, was a really good fit for my background. And you thought of me for the opportunity, and you reached out to me. And long story short, 5+ years later, here I am.
Yeah. So as you know, Beth and I are colleagues. We've been working together, she said, close to 6 years now. And we're on the military affairs team at Microsoft. And explain a little bit what you mean by senior engagement manager and what you do, because I want to segue from that into a little bit about transition and your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah, well, my main responsibility is we have a SkillBridge program which helps people who are transitioning out of the military pretty much acclimate to civilian workforce and kind of reskill them. And our program is called Microsoft Software and Systems Academy. And myself and my colleague, Matt Brogdon, we divide the country in half, and I work with all of the military locations and installations out east that host the program. So I currently work with 7 different locations out east. And so just work with all of the key stakeholders at the military bases to implement the program and keep things operational, and work with all of our site managers that we have at each of those locations as well.
Great. So you've been observing transition and folks that have gone through actually a program, which is not always the typical way of transitioning off of active duty, to go through a course or a program that prepares you for a career. Most people just transition and then they look for work. So what's some advice you would give to those who are transitioning, and what should individuals be thinking about and preparing for, and all those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think the one key piece of advice is you can never start soon enough. With TRS and transition support services, usually that's a year out, but honestly, you should start sooner than that. Once you've made the decision that you're going to move on from the military, you should start working on your network. You should start building your LinkedIn profile. The more you can do, the better off you're going to be, because it really does boil down to networking. I mean, so many of the jobs are hidden, and you're not going to get a job just by blindly sending in resumes. That's just doesn't work anymore. So, the more time you can spend starting, the better off you're going to be. And like I said, build your network. Network is so important.
Do you have any interesting stories, positive or negative, about an individual who was transitioning?
Do you know something specifically? I'm
No,
not sure.
not at all. Just wondering if there's any one experience you can pick out as either a positive or a negative one that maybe highlights some of the lessons or.
Well, I see so many folks that go through our program, so I'm privy to their experiences. And, You can tell the ones that are going to hit it out of the park because they're so prepared. And in our program, they're the people who are kind of going above and beyond. They're those lifelong learners that are, in addition to the curriculum that they're doing through MSSA, they're also pursuing certifications on their own. They're on GitHub doing things. They're really going above and beyond. And those are the people that are constantly trying to work on themselves. Typically, there's a correlation between the success you're going to have in your transition and if you're one of those people. They have a much easier time. That's been my exposure.
Yeah. So shameless plug real quick. If
yeah.
the Microsoft Military Affairs team, military.microsoft.com. So just for those of you who are interested in the program. Well, great, Beth. It's been great. A lot of you've had a great history, and as I said at the beginning, you've really checked the box of every military experience there is to have, pretty much. Anything you want to say in closing, or anything you wanted to leave everybody with as we close off?
Yeah, I guess I would just say there are so many resources out there, and just what us on Microsoft Military Affairs team, we work with a lot of the folks. Hiring Our Heroes is phenomenal. We work with Service Academy career conferences, and we work with Mojo, and there's just so much out there. So partake, don't be shy. If you're transitioning, there's no shame in telling people you're looking for a job, and also tell everybody, because I can tell you how many times, I've been at, one incident that comes to mind, I was at a backyard barbecue and a girlfriend of mine was looking for a job, and I just happened to mention her to somebody else, and they knew somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody, and she ended up getting hired. It's like, it just, having those conversations and putting the word out there really can reap great results for you. So proclaim it like you're the town crier, that you're looking for a job and you're looking to transition.
Yeah, so kind of relating to a couple of things you said earlier, there are so many more resources today than when you and I transitioned. I did about 6 years of active service and then transition as well. And I had a real similar experience to you, in that the first recruiter I interviewed with totally shot me down.
Yeah.
And made me feel like I wasn't prepared to do something that I was interested in. So having the confidence to bounce back from that and to know that you're bringing something to the table is important. And I just remember, I don't know that I cried in my car, but I was a little disappointed that day.
Yeah.
And well, great. Well, thank you very much, Beth. It's been awesome to have you in my inaugural podcast of my veteran experience. And have a great day.
Thanks, Joe. It's been fun.
Bye-bye.
Bye.